Let's talk OOTP settings for historical saves. Most of the game's options apply to all game types, but we're going to look at them exclusively through the historical game lens. So whether you're thinking about your own historical game, or you're just curious about my options from watching my videos, hopefully this is useful for you. I'll try to focus on kind of two angles. One is how to make the gameplay as competitive as possible for kind of your skill level, and then how to make it just immersive so it really feels like your save is not real, but something that could have been real. I'll also cover some of my house rules at the end. Bear in mind all the screenshots you're going to be seeing are from my save in 1996, so some of these will be altered based on what era you're playing in, and I'll try to cover those as we go. And then full disclosure, I'm not talking to developers, I don't have any inside information, this is all just based on my experiences in the hope that it will help with yours. Chapters are marked if you want to skip around. If you find the video helpful, please give it a thumbs up, and you can also comment if you've got any questions or you want to add things for the audience that I may have missed, so let's go. Global settings. There's really not much on this page that's special for historical. For the scouting, I definitely recommend using the scouting system, again, just for making the game a little bit more challenging. As for the rating skills, I'm probably in the minority about how I do them. I like the 1 to 20 for the attributes, and then 20 to 80s overall. I played Stratomatic as a kid, so there's a 20-sided die, and there's a bunch of 1 to 20 ratings, so that just kind of stuck with me when I started with OOTP. Couple factors, like if you're thinking about it from a competitive lens, there's a fog of war element. So if you want, the ones that have fewer numbers on the scale are harder because, like a 5 and a 6 can blend together more. And some of it's just simple numbering preferences. I don't want to overbake this one. I also use the coaching system. My save started in OOTP 21 before some of this was in place. So what I did was ramped up the coaching cohesion over 3 seasons once I flipped over to OOTP 22. Save settings really just comes down to how much detail you like to keep and how much your PC can handle. For a while I was saving everything and that got crazy really fast, so I just saved my own team's stuff. Moving on, players in face gen. I recommend setting injuries. The further back you are in history, the lower the injuries should be. At least I don't have the hard data to show it, but my understanding is that injuries, like at least DL stints or IL stints now, have slowly been on the rise through MLB's history. So I'm on normal right now. I'll probably shift it to high, like around 2010 or something like that. That's a long ways away for me. If you're way back further, you may actually want to go lower. But, that's just what I'm doing. That one's kind of a preference thing. Obviously, the more injuries, probably more of a challenging experience. It doesn't actually make the game harder because the AI is going to deal with the same number of injuries as you will. I love the personality system. Gives you a little bit extra to think about when you're managing your roster. Some people even like to hide the ratings, which for me it's kind of just flying blind at that point. It doesn't feel as fun that way. Bear in mind, if you're, again, with a historical lens here, like the game randomizes the personality for your historical players, so don't be surprised when there's a total jerk in real life who's like a captain or a fan favorite in your save, and you're going like, that's not accurate, just because it's all random. I get why they do it. So here's where some of the fun begins. Development. One of your really big decisions kind of depends on whether you're simulating or if you're playing. If you're simulating, sometimes having player development off can be fun because you get the real players and their real skills that they had in that particular season. But you could still do simulations with the development on and get some randomness at the player-by-player level. If you're playing this as a game, kind of trying to win something, definitely go for player development. Players will not turn out the same way they did in real life, which is kind of fun for the immersive piece. You really get some fun surprises. I've had guys like Mario Soto and Larry Christensen who were like good pitchers for a little while, and they're like lock Hall of Famers in my sim, and then you get like Kirby Puckett and Doc Gooden, like they were useless in my save. So you get some fun stories like that. From a GM standpoint, if you don't turn this one on, it's not as much of a challenge because you already know how everybody's going to turn out. So think about the draft. It'll just be so obvious. You don't even need to see the ratings if you know the players pretty well. One more thing you can do is control the randomness of talent from 0 to 200. I'm on the 100. I enjoy it. I would personally be more likely to lower it slightly than to raise it. I like the human interest story of like this real life fourth outfielder that is making a run for MVP. To me, it gets a little less fun when there's those guys all over the place. So maybe in an alternate reality, I'd go down to like 90 or 80 or something just to tinker with it down. There's a lot of debate about the aging and the development speed. I've left them at 100. Let's just say Out of the Park Baseball's probably done way more research on this than I'll ever do. So I'm just going to trust them on that one. That said, in my opinion, prospects are developing too fast. Players it doesn't seem like they age too fast, but it seems like they get called up too fast. I'm seeing the AI call up a lot of 18-year-olds and kind of takes me out of the game a little bit. So one of the mitigations I put in place, you'll see a few others later, is I check the disable development for draft eligible players, which means when they hit the draft pool, their ratings stop changing until they're drafted. And so ideally, in the perfect world for me, this curbs the fast development a bit. There is a downside to it, though. It makes the draft kind of easier from a competitive standpoint, because if you scout a guy 3 months before the draft and they're a 60 potential, they're going to be a 60 potential on draft day. That rating's not going to change. Now, bear in mind your scout can still be wrong, but it's one variable instead of two. So just worth thinking about. FaceGen stuff's on the right. I do recommend downloading FaceGen packs from the OOTP development forums. I think they're fantastic. They're fun. They look pretty good. And then let's move on to some of the AI settings, and this is where the video gets a little bit more controversial. A lot of very good players and content creators recommend 3 slots above normal for trade difficulty. I just don't get it. These players are sleepwalking to like 110 win seasons in year 2 of a rebuild. Part of the reason why I wanted to make this video is like, how do you make the world as immersive as possible, and you just don't see teams go from 60 wins and no assets to 110 wins 5 years in a row too later. It just doesn't happen. So kind of stop and think about why that's happening. Some of it's because the AI is not as good as these players are. That's a simple fact. But there's also, something to say about like the ripping the AI off with trades. So really, I found go all the way up, and you'll see later I make it harder than that. So give it a try. You'll get a little bit more of a realistic experience. And even with this, if you guys have watched my save, like I do eventually, with both my teams, I've made it to the top of the mountain. So it's not like it's impossible. As far as favoring veterans or prospects, I used to go all the way up to prospects as well, but found OOTP 22, it's really much more balanced, and the trading for prospects is almost like it's pretty crazy difficult either way. Not just I hate it when it's like they won't trade me the #1 prospect in baseball. Boo-hoo! It's not like that. It's actually like me moving my prospects. It's actually kind of ridiculous what happens. So I'm actually starting to nudge it a little bit towards favor veterans, and to be honest, I actually haven't really noticed much of a change from 0 to -1. Maybe we'll go to -2, whoever I take on after the Astros in my save. But interesting how this seemed like it changed a lot. And then for the player eval settings, there's no right answer, but let me position it this way. Enter these based on how you value players. The reason why I say that is if the AI mimics you, and I know you can't like get the percentages right from what's in your head, but if the AI mimics you very closely, then it takes away some of the market inefficiencies and it drives you to do different types of trades. So for example, if you make your trades based on ratings and you tell the AI to value stats, you're always going to be trading the guy that's having a career year for the guy that's maybe his numbers are a little down but has good ratings. And it's going to get pretty monotonous. So if you mimic your own, you kind of end up on both sides of that scale, and it gives you some different trades. So that's what I would encourage. For me, it's 65, 20, 10, 5. I don't know, maybe it's 67. Like it is, very arbitrary. But that's when I flipped it to this, that started working a little bit better for me. That's it on this screen. Let's go to rules. So what you'll see, like really from here on out for a lot of these next sections, is I really like to mimic the real life rules of the time period I'm playing in, which again is 1996 in this case. So for you, it's there's some nice websites out there if you kind of search for some of these specific rules and when they changed. So to the best of my knowledge, everything here mimics 1996 for me. The big exception is draft dates. From what I've read and what I've seen, it's strongly encouraged to leave those in the off season for historical saves, even though the draft, at least the Rule 4 draft, first year player draft, happens in like June. I'm not really in the mood to blow up my save, so I haven't tested what finds out if you actually try to force it to the mid-season, so it doesn't really bother me that much. And then expansion draft, I've only done one of these, but what I did find was when I unchecked it, it actually made the expansion teams draft last for their first and their second seasons. So watch out for this. I didn't even catch it until the draft had started. I just started over. It's easy to override it on draft day and, figure out where they should be drafting and put them in there. But I don't know if it's a glitch or just something with my save. It's hard enough on the expansion teams in this game as it is. So in year 2, like year 1 in real life, like at least in the 93 expansion draft, the Rockies and the Marlins picked last. But then the year after, it was based on their record. All right, finances. Same as the prior screen, trying to mimic real life here. The one thing I've considered tinkering with is the baselines at the bottom right. In my experience, the AI overpays your kind of average starters, second division starters, and it underpays the superstars. But again, OOTP's done way more research on this than I'll probably ever do, so I leave it alone and trust them. But if you're feeling aggressive, you can tinker with it, and you don't even have to do what I said. You can, if you think differently about it, go for it. That's it on here. Just make sure it updates every year is probably the big one. Or actually, if you don't want, it's perfectly acceptable. It's your game. If you want to say, I want to start in 1875 or whatever the first year of this game is, and use the real, like, current day finances, like, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. This is just how I do it. You guys, it's your game, right? You get to play it however you want, and what's most fun for you. All right, off soapbox. Options. So just rename your rewards. It takes 5 seconds. I don't know. I guess OOTP is not allowed to use the real ones, but just do it. It's so simple. Hall of Fame voting, I leave it at defaults. I like to vote. I like to also have like the full voting system in place. So I love to vote every year, and I don't usually get my wishes. And then for scheduling, the default works most of the time. Watch out for seasons after a real life strike occurred. So for example, the strike was in 94, but 95 was a shortened season because it lingered into April. When I moved to 1996, the game tried to use the strike shortened 95 season. And I would think that is because normally there's 2 schedules per year, and for that year there's 3. It was the original 95, the shortened 95, and then there's called the as played, which takes into account rainouts. And I think it got tricked. So watch out for that if you're ever if you're playing in 82, or you're playing in 94 or 95. I think there was some other strikes in the 70s. Just kind of keep an eye out for that if you want to be using the real world schedules. Let's see, what else? I'm looking forward to starting the Futures game in 1995 or 1999. Right now it's unchecked because they didn't have it yet. And one more thing, if you want your playoffs to be accurate, one of the things that OOTP hasn't gotten right is the default playoff formats. A lot of people don't know this, but the LCS, like the old school 5-game series LCS from like 69 to 84 84, 85, I think it's 84. And then again, the early days of the Division Series, I think it was 94 through 96, maybe 97, I'd have to look it up. They were 2-3 format. Most people assume that it was like the 2 home, 2 away, and then back to the home from game 1. It was not. The lower seed got game 1 and game 2 home in the playoffs. And then the better team, the higher rated team, got 3 games at home. In fact, actually, I'm wrong about that. In the LCS days, it was actually just like what back and forth between divisions. So if you want to play the 2-3 format as they did in real life, it is something you can alter. Just do the custom settings, and then you can set the LDS or LCS, depending on which one you're talking about in the 2-3 format. Just if you know, you got a little OCD bet like I do. That's it for this screen. Players, I find no need to generate more players in historical leagues. There's more than enough randomness already based on my save settings and the player development system. I leave this all alone and move on. And then historical is a big one because, well, this is a historical series. Using the real historical transactions and lineups can be fun if you're just manager or if you are only simulating. It's a horrible idea if you're GMing. There's nothing to do. This takes over everything that you're doing. I did my only expansion draft as close as possible to real life, but it's not actually possible to match. Out of the Park Baseball can't or doesn't replicate how the expansion teams will participate in the minor league, or the first year player draft. It's either 1 season or 2 seasons before they start play in Major League Baseball. So, Rockies and Marlins started participating in the draft in 91 or 92, and they built up their farm system. The game can't do that. So, while I used the kind of actual expansion draft system that they used that year, being more lenient than real life is probably a good idea. You could do that one of 2 ways. You could either give them more picks, which kind of simulates them building out a minor league system a little bit, or you could reduce the number of protected players per team, or you could do both. You don't need to go crazy, but from most people I've heard from, the expansion teams get crushed in early years, and my expansion teams are in year 4, and they're still terrible. So some of that due to their finances, but what else? Okay, this is a big one. On the right side, it is very important that you base ratings on real stats. I ran into some horrible glitches when using neutralized stats. I actually had to give up on my first ever save in year 2 as a result. Yeah, none of the players in the draft had any stamina, so they were within a couple years there were going to be no starting pitchers left. So kind of hard to do that. How you base your potential, your fielding, and your stamina is a little bit more matter of preference. I do recommend using remaining years for potential at the beginning of your save, and then it locks from there. If you know, I could go either way between entire career, peak seasons. For the other ones, I go with entire career. Just know these options will value guys differently. You know, there's guys that have really short but super tall peaks. And then there's guys with those steady accumulators of the counting stats. You know, those guys are naturally going to get weighted differently if you're going entire career versus peak. Retiring and missing seasons can be good if you're simulating. Terrible idea if you have the development system on, because you'll have some guy that is going really strong at age 33, and he's not even really declining yet, and they'll just suddenly retire because, well, in real life he was washed up at that time. But it's kind of the fun of the development system is they reach the majors at different ages, they peak at different ages, and they decline at different ages. So don't ruin that by forcing the retirement, at least in my opinion. Using random rookies from all eras could be fun. It's not something I'm doing. I'm getting the real draft classes in. But just a matter of preference if I, ever make it to current day from 1996. Maybe there's a chance I would do that. Sounds kind of cool. And then there's an option to assign rookies to their original team. This could also be fun if you're thinking about that. So the downside is you don't get to draft. But the upside is it keeps the save feeling like something resembling real life. It's always going to be a little bit off because, you're the Yankees, you got Derek Jeter, and you trade him. Well, now Derek Jeter's a Pirate for the rest of his career. That's obviously off. But the fact that all the players start with their team that drafted them gives it a close feeling of reality. And this is important to some people, it seems, like from what I've gathered. Because when this is off, like in my save, the butterfly effect takes over really fast. And within a few seasons, it's almost like you're in a fictional league. That is true. I mean, there's guys in my save that are still with their original teams from '82 when I started, and there's guys that coincidentally end up with real-life clubs. But a lot of people quit saves because it feels like it's too far removed from reality. And if that's you, this option could be considered interesting because it's like an evergreen. Even if you're 30, 40 years in the save, all the new players are landing on their original teams. So, worth a shot. Not something I'm doing, but if anyone's doing this or thinks about it, I'd be really curious to see like kind of how it works and how I get, if you provide content, like what it actually looks like. That's it for this screen, I believe. Let's move to stats and AI. I leave everything alone for the MLB stats and the AI here. Just make sure to check the auto adjust boxes if you want to stay true to real life. So for example, I'm in 1996. I started in 1982 where it was like hard to get anyone to hit 20 home runs, and now home runs are very much a plenty. But again, preference. If you want to play like all of history through a certain year, you could definitely do that too. Just don't update the stats on a year-to-year basis. And then minors. So I want to cover a couple tabs in the minor leagues. If you care about them anyway. If you don't, skip forward to the next chapter. Out of the Park Baseball does not replicate their rules by default, but you could come pretty close to doing what real MILB does. So the first thing is you'll want to set your roster size to 25 for A ball and up, and you'll need to do this for every minor league, so it can be time-consuming the first time through. And you want to set it for 35 for your rookie leagues. Technically, A-ball has 35-man rosters. It's a goofy taxi system, and I don't totally understand it. OOTP definitely can't replicate it. So I suppose you could do like 30 at A-ball if you want to split the difference. I'm doing 25. So the second thing to do is use the pro service time limits if you want to control who can play in which leagues. In other words, by default, like the AI will throw 30-year-olds in a rookie ball. It's like, okay, that's not how the minor leagues work. So there's a nice website if you just Google it, like if you just Google minor league MLB minor league roster rules, it'll show you. But the short of it is, AA and AAA have no restrictions, so you don't actually need to mess with theirs. High A leagues are a 5-year max, so this is the California League, so this is a 5 years. Low A ball is 4 years max. Rookie ball is 3 years and 2 years. Like in 1996, they have this sort of, it's called BC and DE. It's like just two different levels of rookie ball. So the higher ones become 3 years, the lower ones become 2. The website I saw actually lists every league, like Florida State League, California League, Carolina League, all those, New York Penn League. So if you want to get it down to each league, you can check it out. And then lastly, there's something I do that real life baseball definitely does not do. And that is setting age minimums. And this goes back to the problem I called out earlier about guys getting called up too soon. So another mitigating factor I put in is I'll set the minimum age to 18 for A ball, 19 for AA and AAA, and then 20 for Major League Baseball. I'm trying to encourage the AI to push players one level up at a time from rookie to MLB like real life baseball does. It doesn't work great. It does work better than before, though. So if you guys have any good ideas to make that work a little bit more fluidly, I am all ears. Because it's just so goofy how so many guys get they get a year in rookie ball, they get a year in single A, and then they get 10 at-bats in triple A, and poof, they're in the majors. It's like, how'd that happen? And then one other screen in minors. Again, these are, first you click, on your league, choose the minor league you want, and then you can choose the league settings again. Any league with 35-man rosters, which for me is the rookie ball leagues, the number of relievers is really goofy. From what I can gather it's setting the roster balance based on 25-man rosters. So when you add the 10 roster spots to it, it's just assuming that they're going to be position players, which is goofy. You get like 30-man roster and like there's 25 hitters and 10 pitchers. So what I'll do is take a look at how the MLB rosters are set up, and it's different by era. So again, I'm in 96, so you could be playing in 1936. It's going to look a little different. And I'll apply the same position player to reliever ratio to those last 10 spots. So like in my case, in 1996, the DH leagues use 6 relievers. I have 11 relievers on this screenshot. And then it's 7 in the National League. And that ends up being 14 when you have these expanded rosters. So you don't have to try and be scientific if you want to just beef it up a little bit. It's just weird how it just kind of assumes a 25-man roster. So I clean that up. Because it is important if you don't, because you're not going to... There's not enough pitchers. You got like a million position players floating around your minors, and the AI will force itself to follow these roster rules, so you get this goofy imbalance of the players. So that is why I fix it. Some other stuff. More like the fun category. This is the pure fun side of the game. Historical stadiums. There's no effect on gameplay here, of course, but get the fictional stadiums from the OOTP development forums. There's some guys that have done some amazing work to make these look great, and it is fun. It kind of brings you back if you were alive and watching baseball in these eras, or even if you're playing in the 1920s, unless you're 100 years old now. Just kind of gets you, you get to learn some new things about how the parks looked back in those days. And then new for this year, OOTP 22, it actually has ballpark factors by year by team, which is new. So when you're importing, I recommend just using the 4 pictures in the second tab titled Pictures and Coordinates, and not bring in the entire ballpark file. Now the guys that made the stadiums, it looked like they put some good thought into what the ratings would be. The catch is those ratings are based on the entire life of that ballpark, and some ballparks are around for a long time. So with OOTP updating it every single year, I kind of trust theirs more at this point. So if you just grab the 4 types of pictures that go here, then the game will continue to bring in new ratings every year. I also download minor league stadiums where I can. It's not technically correct with a historical league that you're downloading a real, a current day minor league stadiums. I have not seen historical minor league stadiums. But, it's still fun because I do watch the occasional minor league game. All right, now over to sound. Another one that's fun if you play games out. I love doing all sorts of custom sounds. I've found Harry Carey for the Cubs. I got Sweet Caroline played in the 7th inning stretch for the Red Sox. I have trash can noises for the Astros. I can do roll call with the Yankees. Trumpet sounds for the A's. Fountain for the Royals, and kind of everything else you can think of. There's even a couple cases where I bring other sports or just kind of fun things into it. I have some of my teams bring in soccer chants from cities that have MLS clubs. Philadelphia will cheer for Rocky. The Brewers play Go Pack Go. It's okay, I just kind of nerd out on it. It's probably not the best use of my time, but it's quite entertaining when you hear them in the real game. And then we have jerseys. Jerseys too. There's some really nice sets in the development forums of OOTP. You can even find some historical minor league jerseys in that case. I do watch minor league games from time to time, so it's kind of fun to have a different stadium than the default OOTP one, and seeing some of those uniforms too. What else do we have here? All right, let's jump into house rules now. So these are things that I kind of take care of on my own honor system with myself, basically. So I make the trading even harder than the highest level difficulty. So I have restrictions I put in place. Now, the first one is I don't trade anyone I recently signed as a free agent. And there's a reason for that. I feel like this is a bad glitch with the AI. You'll have this, you'll get a great deal on, you know, like a starting right fielder. He's like kind of like an average right fielder, but you get a great deal. None of the AI outbids you. They don't even try to bid with you. Yet the second you sign him, if you shop him, the AI will offer you lots of good stuff for him. And that just makes no sense. Why would they give you some great prospect if they could have just spent an extra 100 grand to try and sign him instead of you? So it's really messed up. So one rule I put in place: you can't trade anyone that you've just signed for 4 months. The reason why I chose 4 months is because it's easy to see. If you go to your free agents, there's a section that says recently signed free agents. They're on there for 4 months. So if you ever forget, like, has always signed that guy within 4 months, it's easy to see. No trading Rule 5 draftees. That's another one. Like, you pick up all these Rule 5 drafts even if you don't care about them, and all of a sudden the AI is offering you trades for them. Like, all right, that doesn't make any sense. Like, the point of Rule 5 was you kind of have to make a commitment to them on your Major League roster. I think you're technically allowed to trade them in real life, but everybody knows that you are, like, really hamstrung. If you're offering a Rule 5 guy in trade, like, you've lost all the leverage because they know you're about to release them back to their regular club. They're not giving you squat for them. No trading minor league free agents at all, because it's even worse than number one. You'll find this veteran, and he's free. He doesn't even want a signing bonus. He just, like, wants to latch on. You sign him for a minor league deal. Now all of a sudden everyone wants to give you something for him in a trade. It's like, you could have offered him a signing bonus of $1 2 days ago, and now all of a sudden you want to trade me some prospect? Makes 0 sense. So hard rule: sign minor league free agents, can't trade them. You can release them, you can waive them, but that's it. And then also no trading waiver wire acquisitions. It's not a big a deal anymore as it used to be. In OOTP 21, it seemed like there were some really good guys coming in through waivers, and you'd grab them and it's like, oh look, now all of a sudden I want to trade you back for him. You just waived him. But I left it on. Gives you a little extra consideration before picking some up off of waivers that, you know, especially if they've got like a long-term contract or something, like you're stuck with them if they turn out poorly. And then no trading players with injuries. They have like the whole pending diagnosis, because I think the AI kind of considers that to be an injury length of 0, like behind the code. It's the speculation. So if it's the diagnosis pending, they're on immediate trade hold. Now, if they get announced like, oh, they're out for 15 months with a torn UCL, it seems like the AI adapts. It's like, nope, I'm not giving you a squat for him now, which is the right thing. I could trade him, though. And then, no, there's this goofy thing that the AI does. I will not trade for a player 100% covered if the removal breaks the trade. It's really weird, and maybe you've seen it. The AI, when the AI really wants to give up on someone, they'll let you can trade some completely nobody prospect for this player 100%. Where it really breaks is then you'll say, I want more. And they'll say, okay, I'll give you more. And they'll say, okay, that looks like a good trade. I'll let you have the 100 covered player back. And then they'll say, no, I don't want to do the trade. Which is just a pure glitch. Because if they're trading you a player 100% cover, like they're literally they're giving you everything for nothing. And the fact that they would now back out of the trade, like there's a math error in there. So just don't do it. All right, those are some of my trading restrictions rules. Feel free to apply, feel free to ignore. A couple other house rules I do. Makes the trades even harder. I only will use the complete trade button. So no saying, okay, this, you know, when the opposing GM says, submit your offer and I'll get back to you. Not allowed. They either agree to it or they don't. So it gives the trade difficulty like kind of an extra notch forward. And then more recently, I've started doing one that's been kind of fun. It can be frustrating at times, but it's a good challenge. My own assistant general manager must support trades. So if the other 8 GM's like, yeah, let's do this, and my assistant general manager's like, I don't know, it's up to you. Nope. It's kind of simulating a organization that like you have to be collaborative and everyone has to agree. And it's actually kind of funny. It's frustrating sometimes, but it's funny. Like, okay, I have to give the AI more to get them to agree, but now my AGM doesn't agree, so now I have to try and get more without making their GM unhappy. And again, it's a good extra challenge, even if it does create a little bit more work. And then one of the just like goofy things, I don't make trades until after, like during the season, after that day's games are completed. Because when you trade, you know, they'll go designated for assignment. You can throw them on your roster, but the AI doesn't do that. So I realized once I kind of screwed over the AI because I traded for their starting pitcher who was supposed to pitch that day. And then, like, their bullpen was burned. They didn't have any other starters, and, like, it really ruined them. So it's like, okay, simple thing. Play games, then trade. And then a few other rules. Top 100 prospects if they're waived, which I haven't seen happen in OOTP 22, which is fantastic. I'm glad they cleaned that up. But before that, it was like, okay, if they do that, like, override, I'll go. And if you just put them back on their minors, doesn't happen. It doesn't work because they'll just waive them again the next day. So if you force them onto their 40-man, then it fixed it. But again, that's an OOTP 21 thing. There are still some situations like in the off season where the AI will randomly release like a ton of their rookie ball players. Can't figure out why it happens, but when it does, I just force them all back. Fortunately, it puts them on designated assignment for 10 days first, so you don't have to like hunt for them through the waivers. You just go team by team and put them back. And when it happens, like all the teams do it, so it's really obvious when it does happen. I learned this one kind of in a fun way. Don't negotiate an extension when a player's in their secondary position. You might be thinking like, wait, what is that? So try it sometime. Take your starting center fielder and initiate an extension offer, and they'll make their ask. Then go change their position to first base and go back to the extension page. They'll ask for a lot less. Don't do that. It's funny to look at, but don't do it. And then replicating a real rule that doesn't apply to OOTP. When you send a player down to the minors, unless there's an injury, you have to wait 10 days before you recall them. So I follow suit with that. One note I missed earlier, and I'll go back to this prior screen. This no trading minor leaguers, no trading waiver acquisitions. If you're thinking like, how do you keep track of that? Very easy. The second you bring them on, set them as untouchable in your trade settings, so that when you are, when you're negotiating trades with an AI and like, hey, I want Barry Bonds, and you say, okay, what do you want? Your untouchables won't even appear. And then for whatever reason, if you happen to like try and shop them or do something like proactive to move them on, your assistant GM will be like, I don't think we should trade this player because he's untouchable. And you'll be like, okay, that's right, I can't trade this guy. So so you don't have to worry about remembering after the fact who you can trade and who you can't. You just have to remember when you actually pick them up to immediately put them on the untouchable. Okay, I think that is it. So I hope this was helpful for you. I hope this gave you some ideas. If you guys are starting your saves, maybe you can take a few of these and apply them. Really, at the end of the day, this is your game. Play it your way. I'm not here to preach to you of like what's wrong or what's right or what's too easy or too hard. You do you. And at the same time, if you have ideas or if you want to share questions about any of the approach or kind of the thought process, feel free to put those in the comments. And I also encourage you guys, coach each other up. If hopefully this is something that can be really helpful for everybody. So get out there, have some fun. Again, for those of you who are checking out my videos, now you know a little bit about what's going on behind the scenes. And thanks for your time. Have a great time playing out of the park baseball. See ya.